Welcome back, everybody, here to the Weekly Roar. Another episode coming to you. A bit different of a situation, a bit different of an environment, and obviously different voices that are going to be presented to you today, considering that, well, we're going a little bit different in terms of just how we take this entire thing. So I'll go ahead, go around the table. My name is Dallas, otherwise known as Mick, an alumni of UNA. I graduated in the year of 2022, and I was part of the R6 team, Hearthstone team, Valorant team, and the COD team as well. Did a whole bunch of things out there, and I'll be joined as an alumni for the day.
You have to follow that up. That's an unrealistic expectation for a resume sheet. I'm in Frenosis, always known as Scott. I'm an alumni. Graduated 21 December. Was it 20 December? Something along those lines. I was on the R6 team. That's all I got. I'm not a man of many hats in regards to the UNA program.
My name is Devin Holden. I'm also known as McDangle. I'm currently on the council in the University of North Alabama Gaming Club. I also play Street Fighter and ECAC, one of our newer leagues. And I'm taking over for Colton and Dylan in the reins of the podcast for this week.
Yeah, you will be the one to bring us in, considering that Scott and I obviously are casting with each other every single week on SEL.
Yeah.
Countless other leagues with fellas like over the course of the years by now, considering that, that all started during both our times at UNA. And obviously, this is going to be different, considering that we're not in the entire show time situation. And even more so, I feel like being volunteer, we're probably gonna be a little more lenient. You don't pay for our words; you pay for our censorship. That's how the casting world works.
Pay to make my job easier.
But it's nice to be here, kind of sitting around helping out UNA, at least in some regard, considering with some efforts, kind of slipping through the holes every here and there. But I mean, at the end of the day, we get it done. So going ahead and start things off, at least here from at least somewhat of news that I've heard so far, is that recently, looking at Halo, and speaking of Colton and Dill and the rest of that kind of crew there, that they recently did their relegation matches for College Halo, I believe it was. So you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but knowing that they were D2 last season, national champions, obviously able to go ahead and be one of the better players of the dying controller scheme that is controller when it comes around to the esports scene. But impressive nonetheless, and knowing that they're going up to D1, it's going to be exciting to see whether or not they can kind of, hold things down and keep those inconsistent results.
Yeah, like you said, just finished relegations, champions coming into the new season. I got high hopes for them. They made a great run through relegations. Came up a little short towards the end, but they'd already secured their spot as D1.
They crippled their confidence at all?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Because they're possibly the most confident people I think I've ever met in person at any given point.
Most definitely.
Even prior to the finals we had, that was taking place at the same time as the main stage. Like they were singing praises that they were going to go home champs. They had no doubts whatsoever.
These guys have some unwavering resolve when it comes to just confidence in playing. Most of their scrims last semester were against the D1 teams of College Halo, so they're used to this. This is not a new environment for them. If anything, it's just another scrim.
I think we mentioned it to him. I was like, I think they were supposed to be D1 in the first place. Like that's just where they belong. So seeing them actually be there is really nice.
Yeah, it'd be a lot better competition this year round.
I think honestly, it's not even. I think honestly, a lot of that just kind of carries over, considering that Colton is like the longest going member when it comes around to that entire team, like involvement with UNA. And even then, you would see just kind of that entire team environment also transfer over to Valorant whenever, because obviously that's me and Infernosis' main game. Seeing UNA compete when it comes around to when they were still in their tenure of NECC before they went over and kind of split with SEL last season and kind of going all over the place. These guys will still at least kind of have high hopes themselves. You can look at their record and you'll be like 3-12 or something, and you'll be like, hey, they're still here to play. They're still giving it their best. And that's all you're really looking for at the end of the day. But obviously, I'm surprised that even then, still seeing that college COD, or not college COD, but college Halo, they're basically under the same umbrella to some degree, considering, like I said, the weaning support for the control scheme that is controllers still in today's kind of ecosystem. But knowing that going forward, even then more so, that college Halo seeing that even popped up, surprisingly enough, just for Infinite, it felt like it was kind of crazy to see that it just kind of came out of the woodworks, knowing that we had Halo 5 Guardians before that, Halo 4, and I mean, obviously MLG was kind of before that era, kind of in that reach situation. But ever since past that point, it feels like there wasn't much collegiate support until Infinite specifically, which is really weird to kind of look at in a greater scheme of things.
I don't even think like college Halo had much support at the start of Infinite's release either, right? It took a long time for Infinite to kind of, I don't want to say settle down because the game did die out for quite a bit before it started to receive that support. Yeah, like the game like heavily died. And then I was about a year or 2 years after the game's release, which is really rare for the collegiate esports scene. Like that's when the scene started to really pick up. And that's where you're seeing like players step in and leagues starting to incorporate it more. And of course, College Halo itself to pop up like as an individual under other umbrellas in the scene for esports. But yeah, I mean, College Halo it's crazy. It's one of those few sports that it's opposite. The game died and then the esport came out instead of the esport died and then the game pops up or something like that. It's just it's broken the mold.
I mean, that means there's got to be hope for Destiny Crucible then maybe, right?
I would ask you kindly to see. I think you've overstayed your welcome already across.
Who knows what's next? That's the
dude. We got to reapply your college, Dallas. It's our time to shine. You get another umbrella, another hat to wear, dude.
I mean, still got to go back for the PhD eventually.
Yeah, another degree.
GPA only went up after every single degree. UNA was a 3.6. UNT was a 3.8. So, I mean, if UNA needs a player and scholarships are coming in like that, then by all means, baby.
For Disney,
you know my resume. I can be on 6 teams. I can get money for it. But yeah, it's crazy to see that specifically for Halo. That's kind of how it works. And even then, I don't think Devin, do you know whether or not they're actually controller locked or not? Because I know College COD still has those rules where they can't like use keyboard and mouse. Like even though obviously aim assist is kind of there as a bit of a balancing factor.
Yeah.
That they kind of like to keep the integrity of like the history of the game and knowing that it is tied to the controllers rather than kind of allowing that cross-platform thing.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I believe Colton came into Halo like on keyboard and mouse. So I don't think they're locked on anything. I think it's kind of like the universal, you probably want to play on controller just from the aim assist, just like COD to an extent. But
I actually think I asked that question to them. I think that's when they had mentioned that they're like, it's just better on controller. Like,
yeah,
you would never stand a chance. It's one of those ones where the aim assist is just so cranked.
That was
modern COD, it feels like.
Yeah. His reasoning being because he just came from Valorant, like they just won the Natty in Valorant too, right before then. So he's fresh off keyboard and mouse, just sticking with it, and it just did not work for him. Like as far as I've seen, he's switched to controllers now, but yeah, he started out on keyboard and mouse on Halo, that's weird to me. Like just coming from, I played a lot of COD growing up, and I couldn't imagine playing COD with the keyboard and mouse because I played on PlayStation, but. Yes, it feels like one of those games where
console and the real console.
Yeah.
That's actually that's a question for you for Halo because I didn't play a lot of Halo growing up. I was also on PlayStation. Like the movement style and like the aiming style is a lot more like fights are a lot more drawn out than say COD is, right? Or Valorant specifically. So like if you're used to mouse and keyboard in Val, Halo is like you have to track the opponent for so long. You have to keep those shots consistent, like battle rifle things like that. Like I'm trying to remember off memory here. Aim assist would greatly help with those longer engagements.
Yeah, because I mean, even then, that was kind of my main selling point was between those two sports, Flow controllers still so dominant because of TTK just alone. I mean, when you look at most like modern esports that are like in the higher echelons, like CS and Valorant and things like that, and like
Twitchy.
League, you're looking purely at like precision. And when you're talking more about gunfights that are more drawn out, like Call of Duty, even then you get the regen system, you got like larger health pools, and with bullets doing less damage to kind of dry all things out. And with specifically Halo and Call of Duty, with those TTKs feel a little bit longer. As crazy as it is to say with COD, but compared to something like CS and Valor, where it's in Rainbow Six, where it's literally one shot to the head. Then, I mean, it's kind of that whole thing where you're just saving your fingers because the only thing that we can think of, or at least at the top of my head, would be like Overwatch. We're talking tracing and more kind of drawn out gunfights. But even then more so, I think if it comes down to the adaptability, knowing that it's like a hero shooter, so you have different kind of guns and things like that. And with controller, they'll all interact drastically differently from one another. And like say, you know, if you have a player who's on a flex and they're going from an A, then they have to swap over to the Ash. It's like two completely different ballparks that you're dealing with.
Yeah, there was a whole, like, once Overwatch became free to play and they brought crossplay between PC and console. If you're not aware, how crossplay works is they just take aim assist completely away from controller if you're in a PC lobby.
Right.
Because there's a whole thing with people using keyboard and mouse on console, like through these
Zims?
like adapter, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just completely unfair. So once they actually ported it over, they just took away aim assist completely. Like the Lauderdale County tournament that you and I held, that was the very first tournament we ever had, and I competed in it. It was an Overwatch tournament, and my entire team consisted of console players. Like, we placed third, like, we did all right, but it is such a uphill battle against the keyboard and mouse when you don't have aim assist.
I think it's a big battle for console players as well too. Is like having to deal with. There wasn't the thing going on with COD right now, where like now COD ranked play is there's no cross play for cheaters on PC. Like PC players are happy because it's like you don't have to deal with constant aim assist, but it's like a double-edged sword. Now all the cheaters are in your lobby on PC, so it's kind of like it's hard to deal with that. I know R6 is that problem. Zim players, you know, constantly because you get aim assist with mouse and keyboard when you do that. Because it doesn't remove the aim assist on console. No. I know COD on console does natively support the mouse and keyboard. You just plug those in and treat it like it's a computer.
They put you in PC lobbies at that point, which I mean, honestly,
it's an input-based lobbies.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I think is a reasonable way to go about it.
Yeah, definitely a good balancing factor. Consider that even more so, it almost feels worth it. It's like a better ecosystem for those who are inside the COD sphere and like Halo specifically, because I mean, you see these games are catered and built from the ground up for consoles, it feels like nowadays. Because even then, I mean, Scott and I mean, on the whole COD conversation, I mean, we were playing, doing the recent Easter egg at the Tomb because Season 2 just released for Call of Duty. And knowing that going into that, what we were discussing was, what was it? We were talking about the input base, but even then, better yet, talking about how they're just not built for PCs anymore. Like, even though you see the majority of your demographic now hopping over to PC because they like the performance, Call of Duty is one of those few games where it actually feels like a detriment to your experience rather than actual enhancement. Because, like, even Nade Shot on Twitter, he was talking about how there was a man who quit from NASA, and it just now flies all over the country, making even more money purely just going into like the BIOS settings and things of like computers and just optimizing it for Call of Duty, which is just absolutely insane. I mean, at the end of the day, people are still buying it, which thankfully we're not buying it anymore. We're renting off Game Pass, baby. We're
playing it without any valid ownership license whatsoever. So we have no right to own our titles. Wonderful experience. Yeah, I think Call of Duty's made like leaps and bounds for input in like accessibility on like PC and whatnot, but we've also taken like a ton of steps back in regards for overall PC compatibility. I mean, you think back to Black Ops 3, it was a buggy mess on release for PC. It still is fairly buggy. It has a bunch of UI errors and menu problems, but like the menu now for modern COD is just atrocious. It feels like I'm playing Hulu. Except for I somehow like I don't subscribe to Hulu, so why am I subscribed to this? Like if I wanted to avoid one, I apparently can't avoid the other one. I think COD needs like I don't know. I don't want to say go back to the old times because like they need monetization. It's just what Connor.
Yeah, let's
like,
not go back to COD's old times. We're in a new age.
My goodness, the UI definitely needs work. Mine crashes all the time. Anyone knows a fix for that? I need that NASA guy to come on over and figure out why mine crashes all the time.
You were crashing in every lobby.
To be fair, I got a giant monitor. I feel like part of it has to be that. It has to be that. Like it's 16% less performance required than a 4K monitor. That's insane.
I mean, even then more so, like the monitor thing, because I mean, obviously you have like software and things like that to kind of put it all back into its place, which I don't think they put too much stress on your machine at the end of things.
Does not.
It's who knows? Like Call of Duty could just see that as malware for all you know, and put it out.
It's crazy. I see Call of Duty as malware, so like we're on the same foot.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, you're definitely not alone in that sentiment, but obviously, Call of Duty, Halo, talk about the controller guys, but even better yet, the greater scheme of things, all the teams, because what is it? I mean, season starting, spring semester just started. There's a lot more underway. What was it? Because you mentioned, obviously, you being part of the Overwatch, we mentioned that. You said that there isn't an Overwatch team this season, which obviously shocked me to some degree because I mean we've had they were, at least during my tenure at UNA, they were champions of their division when it came around to NECC, and I believe there was 2 teams, and that was still when it was like 6v6. So
Yeah.
I mean,
That's still when I was casting under an ECC Overwatch, like way back when.
yeah, which is just kind of
They didn't let me do that final.
Which I mean, a lot of people are also switching over to Marvel Rivals, which is another thing to kind of factor in, because we're not seeing too many leagues want to mess with Marvel Rivals just yet. Like, we're seeing tournaments and things like that, but even in as fun as the game feels, it still feels relatively rough around some
Still feels like a
edges.
season 0.
Right.
A little bit.
It's still not like a beta or anything, but it definitely feels like they're kind of just threw it out there. They're making money. People are enjoying it. They're throwing money at it, but I still feel like there's some, semantics here and there that could really just make it feel a little more fleshed out, because obviously Blizzard, that's like their number one priority when they're pushing out products. So they just want to make sure it feels as best as it possibly can, just to get as many people as addicted as possible.
Mhm.
They used to hire psychiatrists to figure out how to get WoW to be as addicting as possible.
That's crazy.
Jesus Christ.
But even then, with that whole thing, knowing that y'all aren't even doing just any CC anymore. Because I know they were like the Titans for a while, but you guys are part of ECAC now, which has a whole bunch of, there's a whole slew of games under their resume. Because I mean, I remember when we were looking at registering for Street Fighter, they had Street Fighter, obviously that was kind of the biggest sell for us, but seeing that they also had Madden, I believe it was like 2K, you'll have R6 now competing over there. Do you have any info on them and kind of what's going on there? Because I mean, obviously there's so many games that we haven't seen a broadcast for, which has been kind of been the biggest hitter for me.
Yeah, like you said, season just started. I think it was this week as well for most of the different leagues for their matches to start. I know our Rocket League team went through their placements. Same thing with Halo, we mentioned before. I believe R6 has had 1 match, maybe. Like, they're just kind of, it's a very new team, all new players, just kind of filling everything out, learning how they can interact with one another. Just kind of getting the kinks out. But yeah, you mentioned ECAC, it's the Eastern College Athletic Conference.
It's more regional.
Yeah, it's more of a, I guess, kind of a broader regional thing, because NECC, what is their like demographic? Do they
Everywhere.
everywhere?
They are a league of widespread coverage, which kind of spreads them very thin for a lot of different
They
things.
just want to make sure that they can find a place for everybody, which has its pros and cons at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So that's where you see like there's less region split and it's more so division split. And when you're dealing with games that isn't kind of host server or whatnot, it's more so kind of like actual geographic servers like Valorant, for example. You'll find games where everybody's complaining about ping, but I mean, it's kind of the trade-off you have to have for that sake of accessibility. Because when your goal is to drive in as many schools as possible, well, there's going to be some caveats to it at the end of the day, but I think it's kind of worth it, obviously, working out the number to some degree.
Yeah, I feel like that's where ECAC is going, is for accessibility, at least for this region. Just kind of, they took a section and they just went for the most broad demographic of people that they could. Like, they have, their games range from, the big titles like Valorant, your Call of Duty, Overwatch. Then they even have Hearthstone. Like, they're branching out to the depths to find people to compete.
All right. What
Like,
about to say that?
like,
Straight
Hearthstone's
like,
They've got Balatro players.
Yeah.
They've got teams for straight calling out Dallas.
team fight tactics.
That's I think a lot of leagues are actually doing that nowadays too, where they will limit themselves to a region, which means that they don't overreach in some capacity, like having too much going on, too many divisions for these games. Which
Yeah,
means that instead of having overreach there, they'll overreach, but they'll broaden their horizons in a different way. Instead of going vertically, they go horizontally, so they'll
Mhm.
spread their game titles approach. So it sounds like that's what ECAC is doing, which, in my opinion, is totally valid. I think, obviously, with me and Dallas both coming from SEL and doing a little with them,
Yeah, regional
our big
is
practice
the way
is
to go.
regional and also keeping it somewhat small. We don't want to ever overstretch. We want, the priority to be on the players. But like, if you've got the staffing and you've got the overall funding and you got everything else, like, that's a totally valid way to do it, especially since you are providing for those smaller titles like Hearthstone, which I'm sure all 5 players in each in a region that are really,
That's
grinding
5
hard in
lobbies,
that.
dude.
That's fun. Sure, all 5 players that are really grinding hard in that region.
Yeah.
Like appreciate having the ability to have a platform like that and compete.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, obviously, we can talk about everybody's. I feel like those are all kind of your footmen to some degree. You know, your frontline soldiers out there just kind of going straight for accessibility. And then, because we talk about like the top hitters in ECC that's just trying to stretch themselves across like nationwide and such. But then you got the big hitters like even they, because they don't pop up that much. It's almost like their own little Illuminati up there. Like CECC, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not calling them Illuminati, but I mean, they're doing it the right way where they're letting everybody else kind of do all the grunt work of being on the ground, collecting schools, finding talent, finding games, all that stuff, and just kind of running their own operations. And they just kind of cherry pick these regions and these games and these things that are kind of on the main stage. Like even then, now picking up Street Fighter 6, as we saw with their recent Winter Invitational and things that they're doing with that. They're just at the point where they're wanting to become more so like the NCAA, or not NCAA, for example, but even more so just kind of being more of an overhead in terms of all that, to say, let's just bring the best of the best. So they don't have to operate year round. They're just kind of sitting back, seeing who looks good, seeing what looks like isn't as much really worth the time. And then by the time the end of the year is starting to roll around, they're saying, okay, we'll just go ahead and throw you guys in the pool now because you seem like you're big enough to actually kind of have a pitch in this fight.
I do think that there are plenty of problems that come with it, like pros and cons for CECC strategy of going about things. Obviously, the pros, you don't have to work about it year round, and everyone else kind of does the work for you. But if you think of it as you have an A league and a B league, and the B league's kind of like the league known for, like, I would say like your average 80% of teams, then none of them are ridiculously good. Your Division 2 rosters, so like they're good enough and they will beat people in like Division 3 or something like that, but they're never going to compete fairly with Division 1. And then you have people in League A who are all Division 1. This league is known for being the toughest of tough competition. Right. And CCC looks at this and goes, okay, we want to have a representative or 2 teams from each of your leagues come in and compete for this. Well, you know, League A is going to have any team that gets through that's just going to stomp through any of the teams that come through League B. And that happens all the time with CCC. But that also happens, like, I mean, we had CP25, well, not CP25, but the college football, we had TCU get through and then they got stopped, right? Like, that's just going to happen with old formats. So something CCCs can maybe look at. I think they're expanding, like, the amount of, like, regions they're touching into, the leagues they're grabbing in from. They're just really trying to spread that, which is so much better than what it was a little while ago, where it was a little bit more super picky with small things, and it was kind of turning into some competitive unfairness or disadvantages with performance.
Right, and even then, I mean, looking at them as time, as you said, as operations also grow to some degree, you can look at, I mean, possibly having more and more leagues come in as your, like, League B or, like, your Team Bs, for example, just like your Tier 2, because even then, I mean, Riot's obviously trying to push for that new system of, like, relegations, like, making it more official. The whole Premier thing, where you have to compete inside that to actually get to Tier 2.
Yeah.
Then you have to go ahead and do your year's worth of grinding inside Tier 2 to make sure that you're proven enough for Tier 1 at that point. And even at that time, they can still follow the same exact recipe of Tier 1, where by the end of the year, it gets to that point where, say, kickoff, for example, like right now, where we already see half the teams knocked out for this current Valorant season, which also, that's a whole different ball game, because even Valorant, we're still questionable of that whole structure of actual Team 1 right now. But seeing how things are going, they can even bring in possible smaller leagues that just kind of are in the middle of nowhere, but seem like they got some pretty good hitters in there, and then just bring them in, see if they're worth it, kind of sit in the middle of the pack or at the bottom, and then just kind of rotate that out on a year-to-year basis. I mean, because they're still, I mean, obviously we knew most of the regional conferences, and we know more of the national conferences, but even then still, I mean, I was looking through another website, seeing like there's like a Peach Bowl conference, and, you know, even like ASUN, things like that, all these smaller divisions that don't get much love. You know, if they actually get the operation, the facilities for that, they could put that same rotational power into their ecosystem as well. Yeah, that's all stipulation, but as it stands for the time, obviously, I mean, what they got going on is huge. And even then, I'd like to see, obviously, besides them, raise the power of just gaming in general. Possibly holding a national that isn't inside of Dallas, but Fort Worth at the East Place. But
no, it's definitely going to be there.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah, I went there for the Call of Duty Major last year.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's sick, but it just I don't know. It just like I said, I mean, you and I obviously go over SEL. We have that whole ideology of wanting to highlight schools, which it doesn't necessarily have to be in schools, but just going around the country to some degree. Because obviously, we're seeing more and more things pop up. Obviously, North Carolina, like tax reasons and things like that, they're able to go ahead and kind of subsidize some of that stuff to bring in these new venues and these new games. That's why Halo's been holding a couple things there.
Or 6 had a major there 2 years ago.
Right. So it's that whole thing where, I mean, you're looking at these bigger cities or these kind of areas of the world, U.S. better yet, where the majority of the money is, going to kind of goes in, yeah, just go ahead and come try it out. I mean, I wouldn't blame them to go ahead and give it those shots, but I guess they want to remain as central in the U.S. as possible, which, you know, when you're in Fort Worth, still the South. Like, we still got that supremacy down here. Like, we're a bit better than the North. Oh, actually, honestly, though, funny enough, the North is actually better. Because you look at the Northeast specifically, I mean, they seem like the strongest.
There's just so much. There's so much schools like packed in,
right?
And really dominate. Numbers can eventually you'll find something that sticks, right? But I mean, SI is being held there in Boston in like a week, so like esports is also getting good representation up in the Northeast. I feel like we've got this weird sandwich where you have, you know, the West Coast, you have California, that's like Riot HQ things, or where most Riot events typically take place for Valiant, for League, and you have. Up in the Northeast now, you have events going on in Boston. You have a bunch of representation for both teams, like Montreal as well up north. That's in the Northeast. And you have Texas down south. Where's your like center north of the United States representation? I don't ever feel like we ever see anything like
North Midwest is like kind of feels like a bit of a barren wasteland to some degree. It feels like anybody who's in that area of the USA kind of like migrates just for the sake of esports.
But I feel like the Midwest tends to have the best fighting game circuit system. The amount of stories
Midwest,
I hear, and the amount of FGC pictures and stuff I see, it's crazy how like their conventions they do, their tourneys, the events, everything. It's massive, but they don't have like major esports stuff going on. It's just like these small things constantly, which is way more impressive in my mind than doing one big event. It's way more impressive to do like a constant stream of like medium tier events.
Yeah, I mean, even then, like, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it was.
You got your spotlight here too. Yeah, Scott and I can talk for hours.
Yeah, that's where I've been kind of sitting here. Is like, when do I kind of interject here? Like, they just they're so wired together. Like they've been doing this for so long. Yeah, that's.
I don't think we've ever had a group we've ever worked with that hasn't said we have the best chemistry. But he said they don't pay us to talk. We do that naturally. They pay us to filter what we talk about.
I think I heard Street Fighter mention. I like to think of just any FGC. Like you're talking about having a bunch of smaller events that are just consistent, good through every week, month of the year, and FGC does that really well. Like especially with just how big it is. Just I compete in ECAC for Street Fighter, and I'll go to. I competed in the winter mural for their big spring event, and Mena RD is just there competing. Like he's just there. He's signed at Fisher. You know, he competed in a little event called Evo. Like if you've heard of it, like you know.
They have won it, you know, Japan.
Yeah, and he's just in my bracket, so like I feel that FGC can do a lot. Just over a long span of time, just everyone. There's so many people to play against, like so many people to meet, and that's really good whenever you want consistent smaller things rather than one big thing, because you'll see new faces every time.
I think even then, I mean, you get that benefit when it comes around to a 1v1 environment compared to a team. I mean, even speaking once again, I mean, we're not going to try to shell SEL too much here, but we talking at least with our experience, knowing that talking with teams, we would have teams who qualify for LAN at the end of the year. But if it comes down to one or two people not being able to make it, it's a detriment of an experience to everybody else there.
Yeah.
Because that's your entire team at that point. Like one or two people, it's not even a majority, but yet your entire team now can't compete because you can't find those substitutes, you can't find those replacements, those slots to be filled, those positions, that muscle memory, that synergy that you developed for so long. There's just no real substitution for that. Mm-hmm. And with FGC, you know, obviously, I mean, we talk about just FGC in general, which, I mean, it's its own discussion whether or not Smash is qualified within that or not. But when you look at local scenes, you're at that point where it's just a single guy. I mean, you're just one person showing up playing, and that hunger is just so much more overwhelming because the even price to pay for traveling becomes just a fraction of what it would be otherwise.
Mhm.
I think that brings up a point I had in my head for a second there. It was like teams not being able to do it like individually. I think collegiate, and I think Riot is the best about this, about creating a legitimate path to pro for collegiate players. R6 wanted that, never got it. Overwatch wanted that, had it for a little bit or felt like they were getting it, and then it kind of really got shut down by Blizzard. They didn't support it at all. But like with Tier 2 Ascension and with everything that's available
Premier.
from Riot for Valorant below, Premier, there's like a legitimate path to pro for collegiate players, which is even crazier because collegiate, you're not constantly changing out your roster, right? You're not like, okay, well, I'm bringing this guy out. He had one bad game. I'm going to bring in somebody else. It's going to be like a crazy roster change. No, you're pretty much stuck with the same 5 or 7 how big your team is, like with the whole semester, if not longer. And you actually have to genuinely build that chemistry and the cohesion, and everyone has to fill into a system. They have to make adjustments to fill that system. I think it makes you better as a player. It builds a program so much more, which I think collegiate is like a legitimate path, and it should be used as a guideline for most things. And I feel like other esports need to kind of catch up on that regard.
Yeah.
And even then, I mean, roping back to FGC, there's not a specific thing built. There's not a pipeline really for path to pro through the educational system. I think is like a big conversation that we have inside the collegiate scene. Consider that we're the ones that feel like we're the ones that are forgotten 9 times out of 10, because with all the opportunities that are put out there for tier 2, tier 1, compared to traditional sports, you have that pipeline of saying, okay, go to college and compete there. Because even then, I mean, I'm an advocate, obviously, so that we're in the Southeast, I'm in the SEC here, knowing that, I mean, sometimes college is better to watch in traditional sports than actual professional.
Yeah.
Like, and the majority of sports, because you see that hunger, you see that want more than you would there. It's that professional when they've already got the check cut for them. They've already made an entire livelihood. I mean, they could pay for years and years and years. Probably they have generational wealth, it feels like, off a single seasonal contract. So in collegiate, you notice that hunger. And it's just weird to see that, considering it's on esports. It feels like collegiate is the one thing that obviously they're not putting too much emphasis on the actual importance of education, knowing that they're not creating that pipeline too much. But obviously, considering that esports should be much more accessible, it's not really as physically driven as your traditional sports. They're not trying to monopolize off the youth of people to say, let's get them while they're young. Let's get people that are kind of healthy, when they're in their prime, and make the most of their physical capabilities. Because, like the FGC, as I mentioned, is you got guys like most of your legends are like sitting at 40, 50 years old, still competing to this day. And it's just like, it seems like nothing to them. But funny enough, on the opposite end of the spectrum here recently, you also see kids that aren't even in high school yet, still out here in, world qualifying spots, being flown out to Japan for Capcom Cup. I mean, was it South America? There was a premiere event that took place there, and there was like, I believe, was one person. He's like 14 and made it into semifinals for this whole thing. And there's another kid who's actually signed with an org around that same age range, I believe it's 16. And he actually has a Capcom Cup spot. Like, it's at the point where his parents have to sign a waiver for him, like a field trip permission slip, where it's like, it's at that point where the parents are being paid off because they're saying, I get a vacation to Japan to watch you play. Compared to saying, all right, go have fun at the zoo. Like, we're going overseas, baby. It's just crazy knowing that accessibility is there, so they don't have to think about as much as, they don't see their entire structure as like steps per se, as you would see in traditional sports, or as at least us in the collegiate scene see with the majority of esports. There's more like an escalator, but you can just jump on whenever you want, and it just keeps on going, like it never ever stops.
I think Epic's acquisition of Psionics for Rocket League was a big thing. It's a big change for how RLCS works. Because their age requirement for RLCS is like 14 or 13 now too. It's young.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So you have some young rosters that are able to compete. Like the Bob Jones rod is technically like they're technically eligible to go into RLCS. So they do matches and they try to work into that circuit. We know just how good they are now. It's like they're an unbelievable team. There are young players out there, and Epic, who had already been doing that for Fortnite, right? Basically was like, we're taking Psionics, we're going to have Rocket League, we want to also use it as an esport and kind of grow it, which they were a little slow to, I guess, capitalize, because Psionic was already doing a pretty darn good job prior to, Epic Games' acquisition in terms of esports. And then when Epic got it, it was kind of stagnant, kind of stale for a while. It even kind of digressed, but then it kind of jumped back into play as they were like, okay, well, esports is actually what makes Rocket League big. We actually need to capitalize. And I think them letting any age is both a good thing and kind of a bad thing, all things considered. But I mean, it opens them up to maybe some dangerous communities and some people who could be a little bit toxic for like things. Esports is esports. It is what it is. Yeah. But it also kind of gives them something to work towards in teams and things like that. So I think it's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
You look at like Rocket League, for example. You look at the team packs. I know there's been a lot of things about that recently, and kind of the money factor of it. It raises a weird moral question of how do we monetize 14?
How do you pay a 14-year-old?
Right.
Is that work? Is that classified in the United States as worth? That's genuine. Like, that's a concern.
And even then, I mean, when you get somebody that young, you don't really have much of an actual kind of like HR, PR. You don't have a person or like an actual statue. Like, look at Sentinels, for example, and Tens. Tens is like the face of Sentinels. And you got Shroud, who is the face of C9 for years and things like that. And then you got, some kid who hasn't even graduated high school yet, or even in some cases maybe just has a late birthday and is still in middle school. Is that whole thing of saying, you are the face of such and such esports. It's like, dude, I got homework. What is going on here? I can't, you can't pay me in suckers, man. Like, this is, like, what do you do at that point? It's all really weird to be looking at. But great things kind of toned back down, obviously. Here for UNA, I'm glad to see at least that there has been an emphasis, at least in recent years, from me and Scott's tenure. Yeah. That, we had just a Covington basement. Yeah. That was where we did that was where we initially met each other, was during the R6 team, because, and even that was all, honestly, and I was kind of curious to know about, how you said, like, everybody was, like, new to R6. I don't know if they're new just to the game in general, or are they just new as a team? Because I feel like the new as a team is implied, but are they all new to the game and they just kind of want to try it out? Like maybe with this new kind of popularity spurt that Jinxie was kind of forefronting?
No, I believe most of them average around Plat Diamond, around that area. A lot of them are just, they're new to the club. They came in this semester, last semester. So, and we didn't have a team at that time. So they didn't have anywhere to go. But they kind of talked it out, built a team, and we're looking to see what they can do.
I think Dallas, you asked a dumb question. You're saying if anyone is new to Rainbow Six Siege, I don't think there's many new players to Rainbow Six Siege in a long time. The game has existed for 15 years.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff that's added, though. It's basically a new game.
It does feel that way. Rainbow Six 2 coming out.
I don't even know this game anymore.
Rainbow Six Siege 2, it's coming out. Check SI. That's what everyone is to be the case.
Like, I love comparing the Bandit trailer, or is that what his name is? The guy with the OG Bandit, like the car battery, just like comparing that to these new ones. Like,
we even thought Kite Electroclaws were innovation. Now it's like, we have hollow projectors that can throw.
Yeah, you lost me at Alibi.
We have somebody who has a metal robot that can switch between them and another robot.
Yeah,
that
the
can
newest op is crazy.
Scopus is crazy.
Not much to do with the game.
Scopus is not even as viable as you would think. I think Scopus' utility kind of lacks for the rest of the game. It can kind of hinder it. But yeah,
I mean, you're playing more of a tactician's game at that point.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, if R6, I'm still waiting to see an esport put a coach actually on the field to some degree. Like, y'all remember Battlefield 4 where you had like the commander mode, and you're like pinging UAVs and stuff.
Yeah, dropping vehicles on people.
Coach in that spot, being like, I'm doing what is it? Like, actually being put in the game in some regard. Like, that'd be insane.
I do know that for like listen-ins and stuff, like the coaches can only talk during like timeouts for like most esports, right? So I think it would be pretty interesting because coaches get like a fairly good pay. I know Merc, who is an ex Pro League pro for R6, who's now coaching the academy team for M80, which is Stompin, the console player, one of Jinxie's friends. It's his new team. They used to be Band's coach. They were playing tonight, actually. I was working. Merc is their coach, and he's won a major as a player. He's coached a major team, huge team. And they asked him, "Are you going to retire like you've officially done as a player?" And Merc's like, "I've gotten player offers. I've gotten offers to play. I'm still going to rather coach because coaching is just that much. Like it supplies that. And these teams, they pay their coaches well, shockingly. Which is why a lot of other teams call, like when they're like making fun of players on other teams, they call coaches check stealers.
Which, I mean, that's just a natural progression of any sport, though, when you look at it. I mean, the positions, as you can say, get cushier and cushier the further you go up. Considering that, I mean, even you see so many ex-pros and so many esport titles that they'll even get to the point where they just want to skip coaching altogether and just go right to being on broadcast, because they're at that point where it's like, I'm paid to talk about my opinions on broadcast, and they don't have to worry about the stress of performing or anything. They're just saying, so long as I'm PG enough for a camera, we're going home and we're going to be able to, eat dinner tonight. So, I mean, because one example that at least comes to mind, at least recently, because I mean, ALGS Championship that just ended this past Sunday. So we're in the new year of Apex Legends, and I saw Snipe down on the desk, and I mean, this guy has been in so many esports for so long. I mean, he was in Halo for what felt like 2 decades now, and went over into Apex, which is, I mean, still another one of those esports we actually see kind of the cross-platform thing take place, where a lot of they still have the aim assist for controller, and then you see some players on PC, some players on some players on console or at least controller, and it still works feasibly. But seeing him on desk, and it was just kind of a culture shock to some degree. Be like, where did this come from? Or even better yet, Baby Bay on Valorant, kind of being in that situation where he didn't even really go to coaching, and if he was, it wasn't that long of a tenure or anywhere kind of notable, and just went straight to the desk. Which, I mean, even of all the places, seeing him kind of take over Bala's spot with Doug up there has been still very, very hard to get adjusted to, considering when you watch grassroots Valorant for so many years and seeing kind of hearing those swap outs. But, I mean, it's at that point where, I mean, if you're in the esports scene and you do your time, like, so long as you're willing to stick it out and at least kind of put your neck out every here and there, I mean, you'll find something to give you some kind of, compensation that feels reasonable.
Yeah. Even if you just come up as a player, like, that's the great thing about esports and just the industry itself, is that you can play Valorant for years. Then you hop on over to Observer. When you play the game, you're thinking about all this information all at once. And that's exactly what you're doing as Observer. Like, just knowing where to look when. And you're doing that with an aerial view and X-ray. Like, you've done the same thing for years, just as a player.
You know what? That's why I hate playing Valorant in R6, because you would think that as a caster, seeing all of it, talking about it, breaking it down, knowing and understanding like the defaults and these pushes would make me a better player. But nothing's fixing my terrible inability to aim. I understand game sense. I'll IGL like crazy. Like that's the number one thing I do when I play.
That means you could be better at your job. You need to watch the crosshair, dude. I'm watching them.
That's my one thing is I am good about crosshair placement. It's just I don't know to do the recoil for Val or CS. I'm really good in the reaction speed.
You need to play some FGC then. Go ahead and start counting those frames, buddy.
Yeah. Hop on over to Street Fighter.
My MFG, my multi-frame generation. I need that extra 15 milliseconds of T-Sync.
I've been collecting controllers for fighting games, so like by all means, I know you'll probably prefer leverless like everybody else does now over like a regular game pad or something like that. So I mean, give it a shot. But yeah, speaking of like the whole like cushiness, as I mentioned, of like going up the ladder, because even then, I mean. And take me, for example, specifically, I competed in COD for 2-3 years, just on the collegiate scene, didn't even win anything, but it gets to that point to where I became an assistant coach for a year, and got to the point where I was always more of like a tactician than anything else, rather than an actual fragger, kind of like setting the tone and things, and it got to the point where, I mean, Scott invited me out for one thing to do. It was like a casters versus, what was it? It was casters versus staff or something for SFCL.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it was at that point where I was like, I mean, I can get out. And then just at this point now where it's, don't even ever need to worry about playing. It puts it all in perspective. Look at all these guys competing week after week, even then just to get a chance at money because they still have to win playoffs. And we're collecting a check every single week. I mean, that's kind of the benefit of production. It's just insane to think of, knowing that, like, obviously in tier 1, though, that's the one time that it actually does weigh out because, they collect 6-figure salaries. And, whether they perform or don't, the only thing you got stress of is, am I going to get this again? Because you don't perform well, it's at that regulation spot thing once more where you're going back to down to tier 2 where, honestly, at that point, they hop over to production or coaching as well. So, it's all self-sufficient to some degree, even more so than I would say in traditional sports, which I think is another big benefit of esports because you're not out, let's say, playing football, risking a concussion or life-threatening injuries where you're just kind of there past that point. You still got to use something. You still got that knowledge. You still got that just want to play.
Yeah.
I think when you go into a coaching position or a broadcast position, you're even itching to play more than you would as a player because you're not drowning yourself out playing day to day to day and having this stress of like expectation on you. Because that's when I feel like playing the game of most is when after I've casted like a best of 5 of Valor, you would think, oh, that's enough Valor for today.
You've driven it into you. It's like
it's at that point. It's like I've been watching this for 7 hours. I'm gonna go hit the range. I should be gunning right now.
It's actually the only time I ever want to play Rainbow Six Siege is after I attend a major. Like you're in that environment, you're experiencing it, and you're living, breathing R6 for like 3 days in a row. It's all you're doing. You're dreaming about it. You're chatting about it at dinner. You're breaking down with everybody that's around you. And of course, I go to events. It's all with other talent, right? So everyone is just mega brain breaking things down. Everyone has a different opinion and a formulation for things and how they work. Like it's just nothing but the game, and you want to go home and play it, and you're just like, oh wait, this game stinks. Like why did I have this opinion at the end of it? I don't play it for a reason, but like you kind of like feel like you're missing out because you did all this, you watched all this, you experienced all this, but it wasn't you. So you kind of like it was like FOMO.
Yeah, that's exactly what got me into Street Fighter. Like we went to DreamHack not too long ago, and it was, you have the CSGO, Overwatch's attempt to stay relevant, and just a bunch of fighting games on the side. And of course, falling asleep watching Overwatch, hop on over to the fighting game side, and it's just like energy. Everyone's just walking around watching sets, and it's so much more inviting. So
I think that's why Rocket League was failing for a while after like Epic Games took over. It's because they didn't boost the esports, so there was less viewership, and then Rocket League just wasn't really getting the player base. Then jump back into esports. Look at how the player base has thrived. Look at Overwatch now. They have no real T1 esports, and I guess they're like trying to start something back up with Overwatch too, right? But like Overwatch League went down, and player base just plummets. People just don't think that it's going anywhere. They don't think that it has a passion behind it from the company or any higher level play, and so it's just the game player base tends to fall off with it. Besides the diehard people, but those people are going to stay even if some crazy things happen.
Yeah.
On the discussion of police watching, we did have this 48-hour charity stream that was so much things to watch here as of late, but let's go ahead before we get into that and discuss a little more, basically, UNA's efforts and what we're doing. A quick little ad break, kind of give you all a run of who exactly we're here for and who's helping us get all this away.
Now a word from our sponsors. Bigstar Supermarket in St. Florine is locally owned and operated. They pride themselves as the local source for fresh cuts, non-prepackaged meats. They have butchers with years of experience, so if you need a special cut, just let them know. Individual customer service and 100% satisfaction is their goal.
Be sure to stock up on essentials and specialty items while you're there. So come on down to 4695 County Road 47 in St. Florine, where they never leave you holding the bag.
Since 1959, R.E. Garrison has been driven by one vision, to be the Southeast premier carrier. That same drive has been what has carried them through more than 60 years of freight.
With nationwide terminals and a commitment to excellence, Garrison is more than just over the road. They're right in your backyard, delivering unmatched service from the driver's seat. Built for trucking by truckers, Garrison knows what it takes to keep America moving forward.
Visit them at www.regarrison.com or give them a call at 256-255-5500 and get started building your legacy with them today, one drive at a time. For the Win Game Store, located at 248 Seville Street in Florence, Alabama, is home to all things trading cards and tabletop games.
For the Win is open 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week, and hosts events daily. For the Win carries a number of games including Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Bushiroad Games, One Piece, Digimon, Dragon Ball, Universus, Disney Lorcana, Warhammer, and more. They also have all of your D&D needs.
Follow them on Facebook or Instagram at FTW Game Store to see the list of events and new releases.
Now coming back into things, now seeing how obviously we just kind of wrap things up talking about just esports in general. I feel like obviously you get two guys who are in the industry. We're going to go off the rails a little bit. We're going to be talking more so on the business side of things, production side of stuff, because, well, I don't know. If you can find more alumni that are like me and Scott, by all means, throw them in there. I would love to know them, because we, as much as we like talking with each other and how easy it goes, I mean, we've been doing it for years, man. Give us some diversity in here. Give us something different. But seeing how it's going, talking about UNA, and even oddly enough about the 48-hour stream, that was another thing that I did when it was only 24 hours. I ended up casting just voluntarily the B team for Call of Duty MW 2019. So obviously give me a bit of a rundown, Devin, of what this year's purpose was, because I believe it used to actually be for a charity. Y'all kind of shifted the goalpost a little bit, had a different objective this year. And even better yet, what the thought process behind going from the 24 to 48 hours is, because it could be time slots, not enough things to do, or there was too much to do and people want to do things and there just wasn't enough time available on it. But obviously the efforts that y'all put in there and the success y'all had during this past week.
Yeah, so we've tried to keep the 48-hour stream, or just the big fundraising stream, concurrent over the years, keep it a tradition. Like you said, we've done No Kid Hungry. We've just general fundraising for the club, because it is a club sport. We get a little bit of funding, but a lot of what we can work with comes from what we raise. But this time around, we did a fundraising stream for Sebastian Hall. He is a very prominent member in the Shoals Smash series, as well as I believe the founder of it's WOD, it's Memphis Smash. So he's an active member in the Smash scene around this area, and he's been struggling with getting a hold of some of the medicine that he needs. So we thought that we would run the stream, do it as long as we can, and just try to raise as much money for him as we possibly could. We ended up finishing out with $481 out of our $500 goal to just raise money for a friend of the community. But yeah, so 24 hours to 48 hours, we've grown as a club, more members, more people, a bunch of different backgrounds, and just kind of what they do, what they're here for. So it gives us a lot more wiggle room to have some more content, see some more. Like we did, I believe Dylan played the Halo campaign. Like he's never played it before. I don't know which one he actually did. It was really late at night. I was asleep. I had work the next day. Yeah, just a bunch of other single player games, just kind of club members putting their face out there, being on our stream, even if they don't compete. It gives them an option to kind of be there and solidify themselves as a part of the club in the VOD that we save.
I mean, I tapped it a couple times, and I believe I saw Dill playing, which you mentioned, single player game. Funny enough, the one time I tapped in, he wasn't playing a single. He was playing Smite too. That was interesting in its own right.
Yeah, I've seen he's playing a lot of League lately, and I did not know why. Then he just plays Smite.
You're a part of the League team.
I mean, yeah.
You don't have people playing your game?
But I don't see how League is, getting yourself ready for Smite. Just play Smite. Like, why subject yourself to League?
Smite too?
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Oh. I still gotta buy it. Scott, do you know if I can still get that?
No.
That's
yes.
Okay.
The founders, like the founders thing you can't do anymore. That's gone when they released it into when it's now free to play.
Yeah, because they still have beta as a big watermark.
Yes, it's still an alpha or whatever, but you can't do the founders that you need to buy for early access.
I barely get my money. So the founders, the God Pass is really the big sell.
That was the big thing. I have put so many hours in the game, and for high res, I put hours in so many high res games. I was like, it is what it is. Even if it does end up becoming a big MOBA. I do actually, that is probably the esport that got me into esports was Smite's like SWC, their Smite World Championship. Like that was like the thing that did it for a long time. That's like introduced me to mainstream esports. Because I was like 9 years old.
Not a cult following per se, but I mean, it is crazy how like rampant these people are for like opportunities. Speaking of like wanting opportunities and like events and things like that, I was living in Dallas, and once again the E-Plex over in Fort Worth. That was where SWC was taking place one year, and I was going to get tickets for it, and it was sold out months ahead of time, every single tier. And it's like, I mean, when you guys only get one, event a year, fair enough.
I think the one you're talking about, there wasn't an event the last 2 years prior because of COVID, right? So like there was,
right.
It was a complete drought. So the fact that it came back was like monumental for the community.
Yeah, people
so
were probably
kind of
thinking like, is there even enough money in the ecosystem to kind of even do something like this, especially with the kind of time where in esports, obviously nothing going on, not as many sponsorship opportunities, and not as many events going up. So it's just a big weird thing. But obviously bringing it back into today, talking about Smite, that 48-hour stream that I saw him playing that, but also that there was people playing like, I remember the Goons, at least kind of that little club of guys, they where I was working at the time during the day, they dropped by after they were done with their Clash of Clans segment, where they were just going doing raids, and then they said they
there's a
got
whole
like
esports scene for Clash of Clans. I've seen live streams.
One of them, his name is David. He has 3 Clash of Clans accounts. Like, he got bored on his first account and made 2 alts.
Yeah, because it takes a month to upgrade your town hall.
This man has like a Town Hall 14, a Town Hall 9, and like a Town Hall 4. It's
how long does it get at 14? I mean, because the game's been out for like over a decade now, like almost 17 years. So when you get to that kind of town hall level, like, does it take like a year and a half?
I mean, might as well.
I'm looking it up right now.
I thought about
where we could check.
I'm gonna be fighting my own base if I try to get on. Like, you've been off too long, then
right.
If they don't recognize you, so you have to fight your own base.
Or something.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, throw him in some sandbag or something else doesn't miss a game ever.
Mm.
I mean, honestly, like something like that just feels like scary because it feels like there's so many games that if they've been out for way too long, you're kind of behind on it. Like,
yeah, where can you go?
PC again, but it's the whole thing of like I was terrified of hopping into Street Fighter 5 or like Tekken 7 because like those games had been out for years and everybody knew all the frame data they've been playing. I mean, they've had the muscle memory for so much time. And like this past year, that's when we saw like Bravely Fantasy versus Rising. We saw Tekken 8 come out, Street Fighter 6, all in the course of less than a year of each one another. And it's at that point where it's like, all right, it's like a factory reset on everybody's memories, where everybody's in that same learning curve to some extent.
Yeah.
To kind of provide that. So I could imagine what it'd be like Clash of Clans, or even then kind of pushing this point out like Clash Royale. Which League of Legends is one of those things where honestly, I mean, it doesn't apply as much because when you deal with like patch notes like that, where it's still the same fundamental idea, there's not time tied to your actual foundation. Like you're not sitting there. I mean, the only thing that's actually time to time is like obviously Kane. If you want to go blue forming, you were hitting too many melee people, and you got to wait for Shadow Form.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like. They put so much effort into changing it on a year-to-year basis that it allows you to just kind of be like, it's worth a shot. Because everybody's in that same learning curve. Everybody's learning it over. And it's so that foundational thing of just kind of clicking and having that precision that leaves Korea to be the best nation in the world every single time.
Just because it's so integrated into their like day-to-day lives. And I feel like there's lots of ways for America to kind of integrate it, but the fact that everyone's so spread out, it's kind of hard to like, if I want to go watch an esport in Korea, like you just do that on a Wednesday night, right? Like you take a train to such and such location, and it's just like you just do it. Like it's hard.
I was there for only a month, and I went out to about at least 5 different events. Yeah. Like it was.
It's hard.
Wow.
To try to get that in America because we're so spread.
Yeah.
It's just the price of doing business kind of thing, right? It's just the cost of us being such a large nation. Though I wish that way I could just go downtown and watch an esport event instead of like, going somewhere and like going to a karaoke. I don't want to do that. I want to go see somebody game. I want to go watch like an esport. Like I want to live in that environment.
That could be like, I don't know who's listening, but if we get somebody here, Mr. Moneybags, start a new business venture, a new airline that's only operational for esport events. So you're saving all that gas in terms of like diesel for planes and whatnot, and you're only flying from like major cities to other major cities for esport events. It'd be kind of a banger because it'd just be less money because you're not operational year round.
Yeah.
The issue with that is because you're not operational year round, those planes that you bought aren't making money year round. So it's a sunk cost. I think it'd be cool to open a business though that is like, I think it'd be cool to open a business though that is esports. Like you show up like a LAN cafe kind of thing, but like it is specifically for teams to play. And so you show up, there's a restaurant and they like eat, drink, and then like scheduled for that night is this team against this team, and you have like intercity teams basically. So that'd be really cool. I think that's like, even for like the casual nature of it, but like it's cool. Like Tuesdays are Rocket League nights, Wednesdays are Valorant nights, Fridays are League of Legends, Thursdays, I don't know, Clash of Clans, Supercell nights.
Which, I mean, we could do something like that here at UNA, because I mean, I know we was discussing trying to do that kind of stuff with the, is talking about, obviously we discussed tenure and the fact that we were just only in Covington. Y'all have now kind of increased your reach with the university, and obviously what y'all are accomplishing over there now, being in a situation where you have your own facility, with all those outskirted rooms, and even more so kind of like a main stage area, no pun intended, seeing that there's now, like, you guys are still working on revamping the entire thing. Because going back to main event, that Rocket League high school event that UNA just held, there was 4 plans released, or at least, those are renders, I believe.
Yeah.
Like the final copy, or was it like just still more so kind of like a rough draft, where it's like this is kind of the general concept?
Yeah, we had a couple concepts kind of looking at what direction we wanted to take the facility in, and those have since been decided on, and we were making efforts to start construction on our facility as soon as humanly possible. But I'm actually going to get into that with talking about the size of where we live and how can it affect esports. It's definitely a double-edged sword, because while it makes it harder to actually do these things, it gives a lot of exclusivity to people that actually do it. Like here at UNA, we have the largest esports facility in the state, and that gives way to holding bigger things that people aren't used to seeing. So I feel like that's where we're going with our facility, and kind of making it where instead of having these events in the GUC like we always do, they're going to be in our space where we spend all of our time, where things could run as smoothly as possible. Because if you work in that same space over and over again, you're not moving things around. It's been there. Like, you've worked on that same computer for the past 3 weeks. Like, you know it inside and out. So I feel like that would, like, once we get all this finished, our events will definitely be a lot higher quality than what they are now.
Because y'all are already doing those kinds of events. I mean, you got the Smash Weeklies, which obviously take place, and the Smash Monthlies as well. Because I believe one is free entry. I think the weeklies are free entry, and they'll have like a paid monthly that goes on for like entry fees and stuff. Yeah,
we have a weekly on Mondays. It's free entry, and just kind of, it's in our facility. Where it's not our event. We are hosting the Shoal Smash series. Then, as well as their monthly, I believe, is being held in the GUC, like the main event was. But those will have a venue fee, and just to offset the cost of us holding it.
Right. And as you mentioned, like with the double-edged sword, I mean, knowing that being, because I mean, honestly, like Florence, I mean, going to school here, I mean, there's obviously going to be a little bit of bias, but I mean, it's kind of tucked away in nowhere, but it's such a like nice, quaint little area. It's kind of like a diamond in the rough, kind of hidden out in the middle of nowhere. Because obviously you got Huntsville, which is right next to you, which is kind of has so much history behind it that if you're going to look at, if you circled basically between Huntsville, Birmingham, like if you circled Alabama, you're like, you can't talk about University of Alabama, you can't talk about Auburn. Like, what are you to look at? Some people are going to say Huntsville, some people are going to say Birmingham. It's going to be 50-50.
Huntsville's the 27th largest city in the country now.
Yeah.
They annexed like 400 extra acres. So, I mean, that's up north. You got right next to Florence.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, you guys obviously being within 3 hours of Memphis, 3 hours an hour, like, no, not 3 hours, like 4.5 to 5 hours from Memphis, 3 hours from Nashville. Obviously, UA, Auburn, I mean, west of us, we got Mississippi, so I mean, that's a bit of a whiff, but 5 hours from Atlanta. So, I mean, you see everything that's there. It's like, y'all can be kind of one of those people where it's, you say, oh, we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. You could argue, but we're in between so many things that it makes it justifiable for Southeastern events to be going on at.
Mhm.
It's kind of the whole thing where you mentioned about talking about holding events and stuff like that, because now that you have the facility, even though the construction hasn't been made, it's kind of that unfortunate ticking time clock situation where it's like, okay, we want to be throwing all this stuff. You don't want to get people so acclimated to coming there, because once the construction starts, it's like all operations have to cease for a little while to make room for the construction to actually finish.
Yeah. Well, I believe that's why they call us the Tennessee Valley. We're just we're stuck in there, low parts, you're looking over. But I feel like that increases the importance of our live streams and just having the quality of those to be the best they can. So we can show people who don't really know where we are or what we're about how much quality we can bring to our content and even our events.
I mean, I think that's the importance, obviously, of doing stuff like this, getting the podcast going, getting us streams going on, and obviously the high school events and such. But, I mean, with all the things that's laid out in front of you going forward, there should be plenty of space to kind of keep this thing going and keep it rolling up. But I'm thinking, looks like we're kind of reaching the hour point to some degree. So I think obviously that would be possibly a good time to wrap it up, considering that we had a highlight of UNA. Scott and I rambled about the business of esports for a little while. Talked about obviously y'all's production and the capability of what UNA can do going forward. And we can move forward into kind of some closing thoughts, or at least kind of looking at wrapping things up, because I mean, it's been a joy obviously being back. We see the same faces on the UNA on the weekly roar or the monthly roar, whatever it may be. However often it is posted.
More often we roar.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, having Lions on campus, we know it's not super consistent. Every time, we're not here every single hour on the dot. But, just nice to kind of obviously hear my voice. Being in production, who doesn't love hearing their own voice? But obviously being here with y'all and being a part of this entire thing. So, Scott, you got anything to go ahead and wrap up on your behalf?
No, I think UNA's continuing to be on the right foot. I think having a supportive, populace in the university for like students and increasing the outreach for, the program as in terms of teams, the league outreach, ECAC, right, and even college football, right. I think
SEL, baby.
The SEL, yeah, having these outreach for leagues is I think really big, because you've got programs that are much bigger that make giant places for their esports arenas and stuff like that in college. But if you don't have that funding, we're a smaller size university. You have spirit, and arguably that spirit can be a lot more important than just having the extra funding. Though the funding obviously helps, but the spirit is what it is. Because you have
$5 million a day for Fisher.
Because you've got UNA that's pushed out how many esport talent now and grows esport talent by having these events and hosting these things that a lot of universities can't say that they have, right? You've got me, you, Dallas. You've got why I'm blanking on him. He's super funny. The Smash caster.
Cody. Bidot.
Yes, Bidot is so funny. You got Bidot. You've got other people who are trying to get into it, trying to do observing things as well, trying to be really involved in esports. This is super huge. I love UNA for that.
Yeah, it's good. We try to keep our new players in the spotlight, show what they can do, but it's always good to pay homage to the people who created what we're holding on to now as our club. So it was good getting you guys on here and getting to talk to you for a little bit and get your thoughts on how we run things now and just kind of how esports are as of today.
Good play.